Radhika Alkazi is the founder and managing trustee of ASTHA, an organization that has worked for 30 years with children, people with disabilities, and their families. In her work at ASTHA, she has worked to understand laws and policies with regard to children and the inclusion of their concerns, particularly in education. She has researched and written extensively on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and has authored several stock-taking reports on the status of children with disabilities in education. Thank you and welcome you, ma'am. A very warm welcome from our side. Please.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, but I think we are reversing the language equation here. I will be speaking in English, and I hope that somebody will translate. So what I'm going to talk about today is learning beyond the classroom. What I'd like to really start with saying, of course, is that we want our children with disabilities to be in the classroom. Because far too many children with disabilities, as you know, are outside the classroom just now. Dr. Niranjan Aradhya spoke about less than 1% of children with disabilities being enrolled in schools. He gave us the data for 1 year. But if you look at the data for a decade, if you look at UDICE data for a decade, you will find that less than 1% of children with disabilities have been in school for less than a decade, for more than a decade, for about a decade, if you look at the UDICE data. So what we're really wanting is that the child should be in the classroom. If you look at the data of girls with disabilities are doubly marginalized because only 74 girls with disabilities to 100 boys with disabilities actually come into the school system. Most classrooms, why is this so? Most classrooms today, and I think we've talked about it, although I didn't quite understand what we were saying, but I got the gist of it. Most classrooms today tend to shave off all the diversity that there is in a classroom. We want the child to conform, and we want the child to fit into the classroom rather than the classroom becoming more flexible for the child to fit in. That is why perhaps we've had this, less than 1% enrollment. The other thing is, as the law, the RPWD Act of 2016 talks about reasonable accommodation, the provision of small changes so that a child can participate in the classroom. Individualized support, that if a child needs a support, that should be provided for her in the classroom. Education in different languages, in sign language, education that is in sign language and in other languages, augmentative communication that the child understands. These are the things that are in very nascent stages just now in our education system. And for children who are in the classroom, the experience, the whole school experience that nearly all kids have, going to play in the playground, going and having a lunch with all other children, moving to the lab, going to the library, participating in school programs, in outings, are very, very limited. But no classroom is enough for any child in terms of learning, and that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Learning happens in the home and in the community, and through a range of experiences that the child has. And participation and inclusion are key to learning beyond the classroom. ASTHA, my organization, is a community-based organization working in the urban slums of Delhi for the last 30 years. These communities are made up of people who've migrated people who have come from other parts of the country, often in search of rehabilitation for their child coming to the larger city, or in search of economic opportunities. What we find is that most children with disabilities, and if we go to any new community, you will find that most children with disabilities are hidden in their homes even today. Most children with disabilities are isolated. In our context, in the urban slum context, they are often living in the second floor or third floors of one-room tenements, which are highly inaccessible, often not being able to come down even on a regular basis and out. So our first job when we want our children to learn is to bring them out. Children with disabilities often miss out on learning that happens when other children run around in a community, explore, get a wide range of experiences. So our job as educators or people or stakeholders, educationists, is to bring the experience to the child, or take the child to the experience and expose her to a variety and range of experiences that can enable her to learn outside the classroom. In low resource settings like where I work, there are some barriers, and I want to first place the barriers in front of you. I'm sure you all know about them, but it's just important to talk about them. Often for families, mobility skills, communication skills, the earlier sessions we talked about therapy, these things become more important for the family, for the child, and a lot of time goes into that, and therefore there's very little time for other kind of learning, and we have to make that time. In low resource settings, families are often in a battle for survival. So it's very difficult for the family to actually support the child and to be able to expose the child to a variety of learning experiences. There are children with disabilities and other children who have to undergo regular medical intervention. For example, children with thalassemia and other blood disorders. They have to go to the hospital every month for blood transfusions, and therefore they miss out on school at least 3 to 4 days. Very often they are traveling to other parts of the country from the rural area to cities like Delhi, Chandigarh, Bangalore to get treatment. Families are broken apart, with one part of the family living in the rural area, another part of the family with the child, often the mother, looking to see that she gets her regular medical transfusion that is required. So for this child, and for many other, in fact, yesterday we unveiled this report which is about children with disabilities and other children who have to undergo regular medical intervention. For example, children with cancer, children with juvenile diabetes, children who've contracted tuberculosis, many others who have similar experiences. So it's important to widen our understanding a little. But for that child who's undergoing this regular medical intervention, the whole idea of learning outside the classroom takes on a totally different dimension, because we have to think, how will she learn if she is missing so much of school? And we have to have programs for her to learn under the right to education as a right, not as a charity. That is something we have to think about. A lack of accessibility is also there for experiences that many other children have, particularly in the urban areas. So what are the possibilities? I've gone on about what's wrong, but what are the possibilities? I want to talk about today the power of the group. When we bring children out and we place them in groups, in group activities. Whether it is outside the school, that doesn't matter. It's a great space for learning for the child because she learns to do many, many things. She learns to work with the group. She learns to accommodate to a diversity of needs. She learns to deal with bullying that often happens in schools for children with disabilities. She has a reason to talk and to share and to play, which often when the child is isolated and alone in the home, that reason is not there. She develops friendships. I caught some things about friendship in the conversation earlier, which is so important for the learning abilities and the development of learning for children and for our children too. What I have seen in my 30 years of working in the urban slums is eventually, again and again, that the child flowers. A child who's very quiet and won't talk will start talking. A child who's running around and can't sit still will start sitting still. A child who's hitting other children, and in the classroom they say she can't be in the classroom because she's hitting other children all the time. She learns to sit and not to hit other children. So that's the one thing I want to say, that we can have programs that are there outside the classroom for children. Then I want to come to the law, and I want to talk about the power of the arts. It's important for us to think why in the RPWD Act of 2016, there are extensive sections on culture and recreation. Why did the lawmakers put this section in? The Act says that the governments and authorities shall take measures to promote and protect the rights of all persons with disabilities to have a cultural life, to participate in recreational activities equally with others, which include making art accessible to persons with disabilities, promoting recreation centers and other associational activities, facilitating participation in scouting, dancing, art classes, outdoor camps, and adventure activities. Now, these things for the outside, this is there in our law and much more. I'm just quoting a little bit. These things are often inaccessible to the child with disabilities. And we have to, if we want our children to learn to really be, to participate, to be included, we have to open up all these possibilities for our children with disabilities outside the classroom. The right to play. The very young child, Dr. Indumati Rao is here, and she is an expert in the work for very young children. The right to play. Without play, a child doesn't learn. The young child doesn't learn. We have to be able to see that there are possibilities for the child with disability to play and to be able to learn outside the classroom and in the community and in spaces and programs that we have yet to make. We can't assume that these rights just happen. They have to be facilitated for this child. And it is important to facilitate this. I myself have worked a lot in the area of drama and theater for children, and I have seen again and again how children change when they take part in a theater production. Not only do many abilities emerge that we didn't see earlier, even those of us who work with children often are astonished at the abilities that emerge when the child is actually performing on the stage. We need to teach our children to actually be leaders. This is a prerequisite in becoming a leader. Coming onto the stage, talking, performing, doing all these activities. The arts are also very important because they develop imagination. An imagination that the sky is not blue, the leaves are not always green. and that I can become a lion if I want to, and I can become a fairy if I want to. That imagination and going into somebody else's shoes and understanding is really developing resilience in a child, which is so important for her when she grows up. Also developing life skills like critical thinking, problem solving. These skills just happen when the arts are taught as a process and not always just as a product, that we have to make a drawing. But the process of making the drawing is what is important. Sports and movement. That's the other thing that is very important. A lot of children with disabilities do not have the opportunities for movement where they live. In particularly urban slums, in the rural areas where there are wide open areas, there's more possibility. But you have to facilitate that movement. And sports is another thing that our law talks about. It talks about government taking measures for effective participation in sporting activities, and the sports authorities according recognition to the right of the person to participate in sports, making provisions for inclusion of persons with disabilities in their schemes and programs for the promotion and development of sporting talent. As I heard today, education is a state subject, and I think there's a lot that can be done in these areas. Early literacy and numeracy. Today in India, we are talking a lot about that. A lot of focus has come into early literacy and numeracy for our children, for all children. But it is, not much is very often demanded of the child with disabilities. So it's important that we start that even outside the classroom. But it is the responsibility of the classroom to teach literacy and numeracy. But what we can do outside the classroom is really make an atmosphere for the child to learn. Libraries that are there, activities that promote literacy and that promote numeracy, so that when the child is in the classroom, she is at par with her peers. When I say at par, I don't mean doing the same thing. I mean that she is developing to her own abilities, and not that she has the same competency, because children with disabilities, their competencies will vary, and and the education system has to understand that not one competency is required for a classroom or outside the classroom. COVID-19 and the online revolution that happened. Children with disabilities, of course, were most vulnerable in online education, but what we have learned from there is that learning online and learning the skill of information technology is now a life skill. And therefore, it's very important that our children learn how to access online learning, but we have to be careful that it doesn't become the only way for them to learn, but it's important that they learn how to access that. Some reasons for advocacy that I want to put in front of you: exposure visits, learning visits, museums, fairs, parks, markets, art classes, competitions are often not accessible to children with disabilities, and we need to advocate for that change. Finally, I'd like to point out to you that today we are seeing increasing disruption in the classroom. Just like it was in the COVID-19, what we are seeing is, for example, today in Manipur, many of our children are in camps. Yeah? For months on end, they will be in camps. How will they learn? They are outside the classroom. How are they going to learn? In Himachal, where the floods have just torn down buildings and schools have got disrupted, how will the child learn? In Delhi, when there's extreme heat and extreme cold and classrooms are shut, how will the children learn? So with all these things happening and increasing climate change, I think educationists need to think more about programs for learning outside the classroom. Thank you very much.